Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode. Today, I want to jump in the difference between investing for equity and investing for debt. There is a big difference as far as returns and risk reward profiles here that I want to go into. I want to talk about what the advantages are, what the disadvantages are, so that you can assess what might be best for you. So let's jump in. This is going to be a very short episode, but it's going to be very important if you're considering investing in somebody else's real estate deals or doing any kind of lending. So let's first go over what equity is and what it's typically used for and the kind of returns that you might be able to see. And this is going to be in the realm of the real estate world, which I feel comfortable speaking on. There's a lot of other equity type things and businesses and private equity you can do. This is not this. This is just speaking specifically about debt and equity on real estate. So when you go and you buy a house to live in, you put what's called a down payment down. And that down payment is used as equity to get a loan, which is debt. So a loan or promissory note is usually debt, and then equity is usually a down payment. So equity is what you are typically putting down to get a loan on something in some way, shape, or form. The equity is being used as leverage to go and get more money. Because it is being leveraged, there is more risk involved. And because there's more risk involved, you can pay higher returns on equity. So, when we go and we raise capital for a lot of the deals that we do, we are raising equity from investors most of the time. We do debt deals as well, but for this example, I want to give equity because it's being used to leverage debt. It means that you can actually give higher returns on the equity because you got to think let's say you're buying a house for $200,000. We're going to talk about a home right now that is, let's say it's worth $200,000 and you need $40,000 or 20% down payment to go and get the remaining loan you need. So if you're taking out a $40,000 down payment, you're going to need to finance about $160,000 left on here. Let's say you wanted to borrow that money from your parents because you couldn't go and buy the home. You might say, hey, mom and dad, I need 40 grand and I'll pay you 20%, on it when I sell the house. Well, 20% of $40,000, that is I think it's $8,000 off the top of my head. I want to say it's 8 grand. Yep. 8 times 5 is 40. So they're going to make $8,000 per year off that $40,000, 20%. So that's not bad because you know that a $200,000 house most likely will increase in value at least $8,000 per year, at least if that's what your pro forma says. So you can afford doing like a 20% return on investment to who you're borrowing the money from because the 20% is on a much smaller amount compared to the value of the asset. 40 grand versus 200 grand on the house. So that's how it would work with equity. Let's say we were doing the same deal and you wanted to borrow the money from your parents to buy the house instead of borrowing the down payment. You wanted the whole $200,000. You couldn't afford to give your parents a 20% return on investment because 20% of $200,000 is $40,000 a year. There's no way you're going to be able to perform on that. And consequently, if for whatever reason you weren't able to perform, in the case of debt, the parents would just foreclose and repossess the house. Or in the case of equity, if for some reason something goes wrong, then the person who's got the debt can foreclose and take the asset back, not necessarily who the equity investor is. So that's why there's a lot more risk when it comes to equity, is it's in a second position compared to the debt. And this is a lot of times why you see bank rates a lot lower than, what you might see advertised to accredited investors, is because it's a debt position. The worst case scenario is they just repossess the asset. And as a result, because of the amount of money that's being lent, usually as debt, you can't afford to pay or receive higher returns on that. So I hope this breaks down the difference between debt and equity and some of the situations where you might see them. Now, I can tell you, real estate syndication is very popular to raise debt. That's usually how you get a deal done because in a real estate syndication, it's if you're buying a $10 million apartment complex, it's extremely hard to go raise $10 million from investors and say, hey, we're going to give you a 10% return on your money. But it's a lot easier to go raise $2 or $3 million as equity, offer them an 18% return on investment. And you can go to the bank with that $2-3 million in your bank as a down payment and say, hey, give me the remaining 7 or 8 million. Versus doing a debt deal, you might, maybe you're building 10 homes and you need $3.5 million, and you don't want to go to the bank, and you want to go, hey, I want to go to an investor. Well, in that case, you might be able to pay 10, 12% on those homes. In that case, if they've got the money, because the amount that you need is a lot less. This is why fix and flip loans are very popular. A lot of people like to lend on them because it's backed by an asset, and a lot of times it's not millions and millions of dollars. So a lot of real estate sponsorships are great ways to get great returns from equity. A lot of private lending as a debt holder, as a lender on a lot of fix and flip loans, a lot of new builds is another great way to get into the debt portion. But you will not get a lot of the same returns a lot of the times. We'll see y'all in the next episode.